In recent days, the president and conservative media have promoted a theory that the FBI embedded a spy within the Trump campaign during the 2016 election. This plot holds that the intel community, the so-called deep state, with the support of then-President Obama, used this spy to destroy the Trump campaign from the inside. And it was that work that spurred the Mueller probe now being used to frame President Trump. That's why the president has labeled the Mueller probe a witch hunt or Spygate. Watching the ensuing partisan debate unfold, I find it to be big on sound bites, but thin in evidentiary analysis. That the facts are a bit complicated only makes them more easily conflated. But I think I can distill it in about 3 minutes' time, so start your timer. Philip Bump of The Washington Post has published the best TikTok to date. He'll be here in a moment. If this were a book, I'd call it The Tale of Two Professors. On March 14, 2016, Joseph Mifsud, a London-based professor who was the director of the London Academy of Diplomacy, met a young Trump foreign policy advisor named George Papadopoulos in Italy. 1 month later, Mifsud told Papadopoulos that the Russians had dirt on Hillary Clinton. Quote, "They have thousands of emails," he said. That's information that Papadopoulos shared soon thereafter with an Australian diplomat named Alexander Downer. 3 months later, on July 22, 2016, WikiLeaks began releasing emails stolen from the DNC. Seeing this, the Australians now realized that what Papadopoulos told their diplomat was true. They reported this to the FBI, and the Russian investigation was launched. Naturally, Papadopoulos, given what he told the Australian diplomat, was a focus. So too, Carter Page, who was already on the FBI radar screen. Page had just traveled to Moscow to give a speech, and while there, sent a memo to Trump campaign staff alerting them of the desire of a Russian deputy prime minister to work together. Now enter Professor number 2. He's a confidential source who CNN won't name, a retired emeritus professor at the University of Cambridge. He's also a former White House official from the Nixon, Ford, and Reagan administrations. His relationship with U.S. intelligence dates back at least to 2012, when he began work with the Pentagon think tank named the Office of Net Assessment. This confidential source had himself recently met Carter Page at Cambridge University at a political conference. He would subsequently have interaction with Papadopoulos and Sam Clovis, 3 different representatives of the Trump campaign. There's no evidence to suggest that the confidential source was a part of the Trump campaign, nor anything to indicate that he was ever embedded into the Trump campaign. He reportedly appears to have provided the FBI with information about his interactions with the 3 Trump campaign officials as the FBI was trying to investigate Russian meddling in the American election. That's the timeline. Now, 3 points that I want to make. First, ask yourself this. When the FBI was contacted by the representatives of a U.S. ally, Australia, and told that a presidential campaign operative had accurately predicted a hostile government's document drop of stolen emails of another presidential campaign, what should the FBI have done? Run it down, of course. Second, as noted by Aaron Blake of The Washington Post, the reason these facts don't make sense as a Spygate conspiracy is that if the aim were to undermine Donald Trump's election, then why did all this remain a secret until after the election? Consider that 1 week before the election, the New York Times reported on the Russian investigation, but the story said that agents had uncovered, quote, "no conclusive or direct link between Mr. Trump and the Russian government." If this was a deep state conspiracy to deny Trump the White House, then that was the time to drop that bomb. But that didn't happen. And finally, what it all suggests, to me at least, is that to the president and his partisans, this is not about evidence. It's about inoculation. The aim is to prepare the country for a scenario whereby Special Counsel Robert Mueller gives to Deputy AG Rod Rosenstein a report outlining a colorable case for obstruction of justice that would then go to the Congress for debate. If Spygate is effectively sold, half the country will already be of a mindset that the Mueller report is the product of a flawed investigation, even though that's unsupported in the facts. Joining me now is Philip Bump, a correspondent for the Washington Post. He wrote the piece I referred to, How the FBI Informant's Outreach to Trump Staffers Fits into the Overall Investigation. Philip, what can you tell us about the interactions that this confidential source had with the 3 Trump campaign officials?
Well, I think you nailed the overview, which is that he had some limited conversations with Page. He had met him at a conference and had some subsequent emails with him. He had a brief interaction with Papadopoulos in London in September, and then he had one coffee sitting down with Sam Clovis, and Sam Clovis's role in the campaign was essentially, among other things, to help negotiate the foreign policy advisors, which Page and Papadopoulos were. As you said, it's very complicated. But all of that said, I think that the important thing to take away here is that the contact between this informant and the members of the Trump campaign was fairly limited, but more importantly, it all happened after the FBI had already started investigating these folks. The FBI had a conversation with Page in March of 2016. They had already had a conversation with him back in 2013 when it looked like the Russians were trying to flip him. The confidential informant did not speak to Papadopoulos until mid-September, which was a month and a half after the investigation had opened, as you pointed out. So all of this suggests that this was adding some evidence to what the FBI was already looking at, not that this was in any way a predicate for the investigation itself.
I want to put on the screen a tweet from the President of the United States that you used in your column that I made reference to, and he wrote this: "Reports are that there was indeed at least one FBI representative implanted for political purposes into my campaign for president. It took place very early on, my emphasis, and long before the phony Russia hoax became a hot fake news story. If true, all-time biggest political scandal." Is that tweet factually accurate?
No, it's nonsense. I mean, what we see in that tweet really is President Trump trying to make up the story that he wants to tell, not any sort of representation of what actually is going on. As I said, the interactions between this informant and the FBI happened only after the FBI had already looked at this. He was in no way, as you pointed out earlier, actually part of the campaign. I spoke with a former FBI official several weeks ago before the details were known, and I asked him, because it was pretty clear at that point in time that would be a key distinction. Was someone actually implanted into the campaign, or was this just someone who was talking to folks and trying to suss out what happened? And the FBI person I spoke with said, yes, if they had actually implanted someone in the campaign, that's a big deal. But if it was just them trying to figure out if someone had committed a crime who happened to be working for the campaign, it wasn't at all. He made an analogy of someone who was trying to rob a bank. And you wouldn't say that if you were investigating an employee stealing from a bank, that's not an investigation of the bank, it's an investigation of that employee. And that was the line that he drew.
It's very easily conflated because it is confusing, but right. I said at the outset, I think you've assembled the best TikTok of what this is all about, and anybody who wants to know what the facts are should Google it and find it, or find it in my Twitter feed. Philip Bump, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.